Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about qualitative and quantitative data, which generally, this is sort of the big division within data. Regardless of what discipline or field you work in, you will be working with qualitative and or quantitative data. Some disciplines lean more toward one, other disciplines lean more toward the other, and we'll talk about that. So basically, quantitative data deals with numbers. It's data that is primarily expressed in numerical values. Qualitative data is all the other kinds of data, so things that are not primarily expressed in numerical values. So quantitative data, for instance, might be survey results. How many responses did you get in each category for a particular survey? It might be test scores, anything like that. Anything where you are looking at numbers, statistics, things like this, that is quantitative data. Qualitative data can be a very large range of things. It can be individual responses, essays, philosophies, images, anything that is not primarily expressed numerically. It's hard to narrow it down much more than that. In terms of what disciplines are most focused on particular types of data, the hard sciences, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, tend to be quantitatively oriented. They tend to be more interested in numerical data, numerical evidence. The arts and humanities tend to be more qualitative focused. We are not typically numbers people. We're more likely to be interested in things like literary texts or historical events, theory, philosophy, things like this. And then you've got the social sciences, which uses probably a good balance of both quantitative and qualitative data. So that's things like economics, political science, psychology, sociology, any of these sort of disciplines, they blend these types of data much more so than either the hard sciences or the arts and humanities tend to. That being said, it's worth noting that while the distinction between numerical and non-numerical data may seem like a pretty clear dividing line, it's actually not necessarily as distinct as that makes it sound. So there's often a lot of overlap, even if we don't think about it as overlap necessarily. So let's say, for example, you were doing an economics study, and you were really interested in the income levels within a particular neighborhood. How much are people in this neighborhood making? That's basically a quantitative question, right? Because you're dealing with a numerical value. What is the income? The income is going to be expressed in a numerical value. However, there's also a qualitative element to this, because as a researcher, you need to decide what actually counts as income. So, for example, let's say you have two families. You have family A and family B. Their salary, the salaries brought in by the families are exactly the same. Let's say they each have two partners in this family, two spouses. Why not? We'll make them married. The two spouses, they work the same jobs. Spouse A prime works the same job as spouse B prime, and spouse A double prime works the same job as spouse B double prime. I think that's how that works. So the two spouses do the same jobs, same salaries, income is exactly the same. However, family B actually has a lot more money coming into the household because they have investments, whereas family A does not. So even though the income from wages is the same, family B has more disposable income because of the return on their investments. As a researcher, you then need to decide, make a qualitative decision, does that return on investments count as income for family B? Because if the answer is no, if you're only interested in wages, if you're only interested in salaries, then you have two families that are on an equal level. That variable is equal for them. But if you're looking at total amount of money coming in from any source, then family A is at one level, family B is at a different level. And again, that's a qualitative decision because you have to determine what the quality of that income is, whether or not that falls within the sphere of what you're considering. And so this is the way in which these kinds of questions overlap. When you are assessing, for instance, what kinds of data should be included, that is a qualitative decision about a quantitative set of data. And the same kinds of things happen in other types of approaches, even in the humanities and the arts. Say, for instance, I'm interested in Georg Büchner's play Wojciech. There are a couple of references or a couple of echoes of Shakespeare's Macbeth. Now, if I only find one echo of Macbeth, I can make the claim, clearly Büchner knew of Macbeth and was influenced by it. But with only one example, that influence is hard to prove. But if I can start piling up examples, if I can increase the quantity of examples I have, I can build a stronger qualitative case for the influence of one text on another. The same kind of thing, if you're looking at historical events or something like this, the larger number of connections you can make, for instance, between two different historical events, you will show similarities. You will be able to make a better case for it. So this is a quantitative element within a qualitative analysis, because the influence of one thing on another thing, unless it's specifically a numerical relationship, the influence of one thing on another thing is a qualitative argument. But by increasing the quantity of evidence, you strengthen that argument. So again, these things are distinct, quantitative versus qualitative data, because one is focused on numerical evidence and one is focused on non-numerical evidence. But oftentimes there is an overlap. They are interconnected in important ways.